1996, Omega, Georgia. A small town nestled amidst sprawling cotton fields, where life typically unfolds at a gentle pace. But on a fateful October day, the tranquility of this rural landscape would be shattered by an inferno, igniting a mystery that would smolder for years. A daughter's desperate cries for help, an elderly mother trapped in a burning car, a tragic accident, it seemed. Or was it something far more sinister, a calculated act hidden beneath a veneer of grief, with a truth as twisted and scorched as the wreckage itself? October 18, 1996. Along a quiet road between Omega and Tifton, Georgia, the ordinary rhythm of the afternoon was about to be violently interrupted. A passing motorist slams on their brakes. Ahead, a figure stumbles by the roadside, a woman, frantic, waving her arms, her face a mask of terror. Beyond her, a chilling sight, a pillar of black smoke clawing at the Georgia sky. The motorist, heart pounding, pulls over. The distraught woman is Shaila Bryan. Through panicked gasps, she explains the horror unfolding. Her car, with her 82-year-old mother, Freida Weeks, still inside, has careened off the road and into a ditch. And now, it's on fire. The Good Samaritan rushes to call for help, but in this remote stretch of land, time is a cruel enemy. By the time emergency services can navigate to the isolated spot, the flames have consumed the vehicle. Freida Weeks, tragically, is dead, her life extinguished in a blaze that reduced her car to a blackened shell. In the immediate aftermath, Shaila Bryan recounted her harrowing experience to the police. She claimed she was driving her mother, Freida, when she inexplicably lost control of her 1987 Ford Mercury Cougar. The car veered off the asphalt, bumping down an embankment, finally coming to rest in the hollow. According to Shaila, a new nightmare began. The engine, she said, wouldn't turn off. She fumbled with the key, desperate to kill the power, but it was stuck. Her mother, Freida, was in shock, unresponsive. Shaila described trying to pull her mother from the passenger side, but the door, she alleged, was jammed, perhaps from the impact of leaving the road, as precious seconds ticked by. Shaila claimed she saw the first lick of flames. Panicked, she had a horrifying choice: stay and risk being consumed herself, or run for help. She chose the latter, scrambling back up to the roadside, desperately seeking aid, just as the car became fully engulfed. A tragic accident, born from a moment of lost control, culminating in an unstoppable fire. That was Shaila Bryan's story. Investigators began their routine examination of the scene. The car, a Ford Mercury, had gone down a slope, several meters off the road, but remarkably it hadn't flipped. It seemed to have settled in the ditch. The death was gruesome, leaving an atmosphere of profound sadness hanging over the quiet Omega community. But as the initial shock subsided, and forensic experts began to meticulously pick through the charred remains and Shaila Bryan's statement, unsettling questions started to surface. Tiny inconsistencies, like grit in the gears of her narrative, began to trouble them. The first anomaly, the distinct lack of skid marks or any significant signs of braking on the road's surface. If Shaila had lost control, investigators expected to see evidence of a desperate attempt to stop the vehicle, to regain command. There was none. It was as if the car had simply drifted off. Then there was the condition of the car itself, beyond the fire damage. Shaila described a jarring journey off-road, yet the body of the Cougar showed surprisingly little impact damage. No significant dents, no deep scratches one might expect from colliding with rocks or uneven terrain in the ditch. If the impact had been strong enough to jam a door, surely it would have left more visible scars on the vehicle's exterior. Investigators noted that most of the damage seemed to stem solely from the fire itself. It was almost as if the car had been gently guided into the hollow, its engine still running. The most damning piece of evidence, however, would come from the coroner's office. Freida Weeks' body, though severely burned, could still tell a silent story. A standard toxicology analysis was performed to determine the cause of death, specifically looking for signs of smoke inhalation, a telltale indicator of being alive during a fire. The results were stunning. Freida Weeks had shockingly low levels of carbon monoxide in her blood. There were virtually no traces of soot or smoke in her lungs or airways. The inescapable conclusion: Freida Weeks was already dead before the fire consumed the car. She hadn't died from the blaze, nor from asphyxiation. The inferno, it seemed, was not the instrument of her death, but perhaps a gruesome attempt to conceal it. This discovery transformed the case. What initially appeared to be a tragic accident now reeked of foul play. Shaila Bryan's tearful account began to unravel under the weight of forensic science. Investigators now viewed Shaila Bryan not as a grieving daughter, but as a prime suspect. They revisited the scene with a new, chilling theory. The open fuel cap on the car, initially overlooked, now seemed highly suspicious. Could an accelerant have been used to ensure the car burned quickly and intensely? The police theorized a horrifying scenario. Shaila had somehow incapacitated or killed her mother, Freida. Then, she drove the car to that secluded spot, let it roll into the ditch, and deliberately set it ablaze to destroy any evidence and stage an accident. The motive? Detectives soon uncovered one. A life insurance policy on Freida Weeks, with Shaila Bryan as the beneficiary. For a significant sum, $100,000. Suddenly, Shaila's frantic roadside demeanor could be interpreted not as panic, but as a performance. When questioned further, Shaila's husband was brought in. He seemed oddly unfazed, almost indignant, when asked about the insurance money. He confirmed its existence, apparently eager to collect, seemingly impatient with the ongoing investigation into his mother-in-law's fiery death. His attitude only deepened the investigators' suspicions. The theory that Freida died before the fire gained more traction. Had she suffered a medical episode? Or had Shaila inflicted some other trauma? The condition of the body made it difficult to determine. Yet, some reports mentioned that investigators found a hammer inside the charred vehicle, leading to speculation it could have been used as a weapon, though proving this was another challenge. The local sheriff in Omega, dealing with limited resources, called in independent experts to assist. These experts corroborated the initial police findings. The car suffered little impact damage. The fire, they noted, seemed to burn hottest on the passenger side, where Freida's body was found, suggesting the possible use of an accelerant poured directly there. They also raised a question about the passenger door. If Shaila claimed it was jammed, how did the fire penetrate so intensely if it were closed? Or was it open during the blaze, allowing Shaila to watch, ensuring her mother was truly gone before she ran for help? Armed with the autopsy results, the suspicious circumstances at the scene, and the potential financial motive, the prosecutor felt he had enough. Shaila Bryan was arrested and charged with the murder of her mother, Freida Weeks, and with arson, for attempting to conceal the crime. The prosecution laid out its case. Shaila, perhaps burdened by an ailing mother or enticed by the insurance payout, planned and executed Freida's murder. They painted her as a cold, calculating killer who then concocted an elaborate story of an accident. Shaila, facing the grim reality of a trial, initially chose to defend herself, a decision that perhaps reflected her desperation or a misguided confidence. In court, her story shifted. She now admitted she had managed to turn off the ignition, but claimed as she got out to help her mother, the car inexplicably moved further into the ditch, trapping Freida before catching fire from a distance. This new version, so different from her initial statements, only served to convince the jury of her guilt. The inconsistencies were too glaring. Those close to the family whispered about underlying tensions. Some suggested Shaila and her husband were weary of caring for Freida, who suffered from various ailments requiring significant attention. Getting rid of Freida, the theory went, would offer them freedom and a financial windfall, two birds with one stone. The jury agreed with the prosecution. Shaila Bryan was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. For many, justice had been served. But the story was far from over. Despite the conviction, a small circle of Shaila's friends and supporters remained convinced of her innocence. They pooled their resources, raising money to hire new, independent experts to re-examine every piece of evidence. Their efforts would bring two key figures into the case, Dr. Gerard Hurst and automotive expert Chris Bloom. Dr. Hurst meticulously reviewed the entire case file, police reports, witness testimonies, forensic transcripts. But it was Chris Bloom, the car specialist, who zeroed in on the vehicle itself, the 1987 Ford Mercury Cougar. Bloom posed a critical question: what if the fire wasn't arson? What if it was caused by a mechanical failure? He focused on the car's ignition system, specifically a component in the steering column known as the système de démarrage. Bloom discovered a crucial piece of information: certain Ford models from that era, including Mercury Cougars, had a known manufacturing defect in this very ignition switch. This defect could cause the switch to overheat, smolder, and in some cases, erupt into flames. This wasn't just a theory. Ford, Bloom revealed, had already recalled millions of vehicles due to this exact fire risk. It was one of the largest recall operations in automotive history. Suddenly, Shaila's claim about struggling with the key, about the car behaving erratically, took on a new, chilling significance. Could it be that the stuck ignition she described was actually the faulty switch overheating, on the verge of igniting? The defense now had a powerful alternative explanation for the fire, one that pointed not to Shaila, but to a defect within the car itself. They argued that the intense heat from an electrical fire originating in the steering column could indeed melt plastics, create acrid smoke, and rapidly spread. This new evidence faced a hurdle. At Shaila's original trial, the prosecution had presented an expert, Ralph Noel, who testified that while some Ford models had this ignition defect, the 1987 Mercury Cougar was supposedly not among them. He claimed the issue primarily affected 1988 models and newer, but Shaila's new defense team, led by Dr. Hurst and Bloom, challenged Noel's testimony. They argued his assessment was flawed, possibly even biased. Bloom contended that the ignition components in the 87 and 88 models were virtually identical, sharing the same serial numbers in many cases. More shockingly, the defense uncovered evidence suggesting Ralph Noel had financial ties to Ford, allegedly receiving substantial payments from the auto giant, casting serious doubt on his impartiality. If true, the expert who helped send Shaila to prison might have been compromised. Armed with this compelling new evidence of a potential manufacturing defect and questions surrounding the prosecution's expert, Shaila Bryan's legal team petitioned for a retrial. It was a long shot. Overturning a conviction is an arduous process, requiring truly game-changing new information. But the arguments were persuasive enough. The judiciary agreed to reopen the case. The new trial, held in 1998, was moved to Tifton, away from the intense local scrutiny of Omega. It quickly transformed into a battle of experts. Dr. Hurst and Chris Bloom presented their findings on the Ford ignition defect. They explained how such a fire could account for the charring patterns, even the melted components that the prosecution had attributed to accelerants. They argued that the intense heat and pressure from an internal car fire could cause a fuel cap to pop off or even explode, explaining why it was found open. The defense systematically dismantled the prosecution's original forensic interpretations. The accelerant traces could be melted plastics and other car materials. The passenger door being open? Not necessarily. The fire's intensity could have warped the frame or been fanned by drafts. Freida dying before the fire? The defense suggested the stress of the car going off-road, the initial smoke from a smoldering ignition switch, could have triggered a fatal cardiac event in an 82-year-old woman with potential coronary insufficiency, a point the coroner had noted as a possibility. Even if overshadowed by the murder theory, the prosecution clung to its original narrative, insisting Shaila was a murderer who had cleverly tried to mask her crime. But the revelation about Ralph Noel's alleged conflict of interest delivered a staggering blow to their credibility. The expert who had assured the first jury the car was safe was now painted as potentially beholden to the car manufacturer. After 4 intense days of deliberation in the retrial, the jury returned with its verdict. Shaila Bryan was found not guilty. The charge of killing her mother was overturned. After serving less than 2 years in prison, she was a free woman. The outcome sent shockwaves through the community. Had a grieving daughter been wrongly accused, A victim of a faulty car and perhaps a flawed justice system? Or had a cunning killer exploited a known vehicle defect to escape responsibility? To this day, the case of Freida Weeks and Shaila Bryan remains a subject of debate. Many believe the evidence that acquitted Shaila was insufficient to definitively prove the car was at fault, and that troubling questions about her initial statements and the insurance money were never fully resolved. Was the Ford Mercury Cougar's defect a convenient scapegoat, or the genuine cause of a tragic accident that led to a wrongful conviction? Did Shaila Bryan truly lose her mother in a horrific accident, then suffer the further trauma of being accused of her murder? Or did she manipulate the circumstances, her grief a calculated performance, only to be saved by a stroke of engineering misfortune on Ford's part? The truth, like the smoke from that roadside inferno, remains elusive, a haunting reminder that sometimes, even when the courts have spoken, the deepest mysteries remain unraveled. The line between accident and intent, victim and perpetrator, can sometimes be as fragile as life itself, easily obscured by tragedy and the desperate human need for answers. In the quiet fields of Georgia, the echo of that fiery day serves as a chilling testament to that ambiguity.